Hi, everybody. It's February 8th, 2024, and this is the weekly Backdrop Developers meeting. We get together every week to talk about development priorities and just general development questions for Backdrop CMS. My name is Nate Lampton. I'm Quick Sketch on the internet. I'm core committer and technical lead for the Backdrop project. We've got a nice little group here today, and we'll do some introductions of the people present. We'll start with Greg, and then we'll go to Tim.
Hi, my name is Greg. Joining from Melbourne, Australia. Usually 90% of the time here, otherwise in Greece. I work as a support engineer for a hosting company, Acquia, and I like to help with everything related to Backdrop. That's it.
Thanks, Greg. Tim, and then Jen.
Sure. I'm Tim Erickson. I'm St. Paul Tim on the internet. I'm in Deerwood, Minnesota. And I'm just going to share a side fact. I'm excited this week because I just passed my Part 107 remote pilot license. I'm going to be an official drone pilot now. Excited about that. That's been my hobby for the last year. That's it.
Thanks, Tim. Jen, and then Neil.
Jen Lampton, joining from Oakland, California. Very excited about all of our new contributors. That's it for me.
Thanks, Jen. Neil, and then Izzy.
Neil, also Oakland, California. Been in the family for a long time, mostly invisible. And I'm going to name myself the bridge between Backdrop and CiviCRM. I'm not the only one, but I'm probably the less busy one. Less visible one. Anyway.
Thanks, Neil. Izzy, and then Anthony.
Hi, I'm Izzy. I'm from Vancouver, BC, Canada. Freelance developer using Drupal for about 16 years, some WordPress, and now Backdrop, which is back to reality for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Izzy. And finally, Anthony.
Hi, I'm Anthony. I'm a tech lead at Giant Rabbit, and we provide web services for nonprofits. And I've been working with Drupal for a long time, and I love it. And now we're doing more and more with Backdrop, and we love it as well. And I'm from Alameda, California.
Yay, awesome. Thanks for joining today. And great to hear Backdrop being used at nonprofits. That is what it was made for. All right, Jen, there's some community updates before we get into the general discussion.
Yeah, we have a handful of new things going on in the community. For starters, we have a new showcase website added. I haven't published it yet, so if anyone's trying to see it, you might not be able to get there, but that'll be published later today. We have a new contributor. Somebody's contributing a brand new theme, so that's really exciting. And we have a new module release today. Security Kit was ported from Drupal. This is one of Laren's, and there's a whole swath of them that came in from him yesterday. So I would imagine seeing more in the near future.
Great. Thanks, Jen. All right, Neil, you got the first topic of the day here, which is CiviCRM and cross-marketing, it looks like. Can you tell us more about what you have in mind or what you'd like to talk about?
Sure. Yeah, I wanted to open up a can of worms. So first of all, I just dropped in really quickly last week, and I had just come out of a CiviCRM marketing meeting, and what I understood from you all, for some of you anyway, that the data which was being surfaced from some of the metrics that Civi is capturing were inaccurate. And I knew that to be true, and it had been further confirmed to be true. I sit currently on the CiviCRM Community Council, and one of my teammates there has access to a new set of Civi sucked out of the cyberspace data set that shows, and I can share some graphics with you in a second, shows that the presence of Backdrop is significantly higher than we in Civiland knew, and possibly I'm hope to please happily surprise you all that you may also not know about. So one, I just wanted to share that data with you. And And then if there are next steps, it can be an agenda item for the future. I don't know what internal protocol you have when this sort of news comes your way, but I'm certainly open to revisiting and possibly be a little bit more visible next time live comes around, or anything else that you think I can be doing as sort of a ambassador champion. I'm a Civi user, I'm not a backdrop user. Anyway, so that's what I came back for. So here is a graphic that was pulled out of a new Civi stats tool that it took me a little while to figure out. Maybe some of you are used to these sort of graphs, can see instantly, but Joe was able to screenshot it at this very point near the cursor to show that Civi is documenting over 800 instances of backdrop and Civi playing nicely together, no doubt.
Wow, looks like double or more the number of Joomla sites that are out there on
That
Civi.
that was the point that was mentioned. I mean, Joomla has its own passionate audience, we all know, and some have a long-time Civi users. So anyway, yes, that's one observation for sure. So I just wanted to notate this. I'm happy to, well, it's a graphic, so I can stick it in the chat. I know how to do that. So that's one thing I wanted to surface. And then the other thing I wanted to surface, I'm going to just stop sharing and share another screen, is that the tool that you and I also know, not fully love, is this site here, right? stats.civicrm.org, which shows a certain set of data that I'm a little bit foggy about where it comes from, as are some of my longtime Civi mates. And then just recently, what has become more available, I think funded by other partnerships, is where that screenshot came from. And I don't yet have access, go figure, to the live data that is coming through this set. And my membership, for some reason, is not allowing me to see this. But I wanted just to note that there is now a new site that's tracking live data, which is obviously where the backdrop graphic came from. So anyway, I just wanted to, that's really what I came for. Yes, you were right. The data that we all been looking at is inaccurate. My God, there's some new data that isn't that exciting. And here's the portal to it, should any of you be interested in
Right.
having access.
On our end, we didn't we didn't have any data to support that the stats were inaccurate. It just seemed very surprising because currently looking at our stats page, usage stats page that was last updated with data January 27th, so it always lags 1 week. I see the sites reporting backdrop usage around the vicinity of 2,700. And if the data that you just presented is accurate, it means that about one third of the sites that using backdrop are using CVCRM, which is exciting, but also surprising.
Yeah, well, there's also data differences in that we might be collecting certain sites and Civi might be collecting more or different sites than we are. So there's definitely that aspect that these numbers aren't guaranteed to be lining up 100%.
You know, and as soon as I can get some clarification from the higher ups, horizontal higher ups, anyway, I certainly want to add that to my toolbox to better understand the source of the data, and certainly will share that with you all as well. So I can't share the graphic that I showed you because I don't seem to have access to sharing that in this Zoom link files from my own computer. But I can certainly email it to some of you if you're interested in storing that somewhere. So I don't really have much more of an agenda other than here's what I discovered. And I guess the only agenda is that at some point in time, you know, how do we build a stronger bridge? How can cities support backdrop?
We used to, in the early days, we used to have one of the weekly meetings. So we have two weekly meetings. One of them is this, the second one is the dev meeting. And the one that precedes it alternates each week. So every fortnight, we used to we used to call it a marketing meeting. But then because we don't sell anything, the word marketing didn't seem right. So we changed that to an outreach meeting. And this is the meeting where we try to reach out to more folks about Backdrop, and then it became a community meeting, correct, Tim? Tim is more
Yeah,
than one.
well, technically it was supposed to shift to a different time and be replaced by the user group meeting. But we haven't been regularly meeting with the outreach group, so we need to figure that out. So, yeah. I just want to step back. So this, I mean, we got an email from an agency that had this number and said that they were excited to see that there were so many backdrop sites. And I looked at the number and I kind of shook my head. That like seemed super surprising to me as well, that it's that high. I mean, I'd love it if it were that, if that is true. But it also, Nate, it just makes me wonder if maybe they're getting some data that we're not, that's actually good data, and maybe it's our data that's bad. Do we have more sites out there than we think we do?
Yeah, that would be nice.
It would be nice, and that's the optimist. You know, when I saw that number, I thought, well, gee, if they're accurate, I have a hard time believing that a third of our sites are using Civi. Maybe the upside to this is that there's more backdrop sites out there.
I know for a fact that Jason mentioned that they have a cluster of sites and they have
Right.
the statistics that they're reporting back is disabled or
Right.
collectively reported as one, where it's
Right.
maybe dozens of them. I know that use case, but I'm not sure how wide that is, that widespread.
Just quickly looking at those statistics that you were showing us, it makes me wonder if it might help us make the case for Drupal 7 sites that are using Civi CRM to be more open to their path of upgrading to Backdrop.
Sure. I mean, I think that's definitely true, but it sounds to me like that might be the area we're having the most success. Is with Civi. Not that we shouldn't, keep doing it and do it better, but if really like a third of our sites are using Civi, that's like an interesting sign.
Mm-hmm.
As somebody who follows the usage stats fairly closely, I often wonder how confident we are in them, right? So, and I'm sure I've asked you this, Nate, before, and I'm sure you've given me answers, but what's your freshest theory on how accurate you think those numbers are, our usage?
It's been a while since I've looked at it. I have a fair amount of confidence that it's the same reporting algorithm that Drupal uses.
Right.
So that's the really only information I've got there.
That's not quite true. We did a bunch of cleanup to make sure we weren't getting duplicate sites. Like we don't get 3 versions of every site that's on Pantheon, and we don't get test sites reporting. And Drupal does count those. We don't know how much they matter because they're not counted long term. But we did do a lot of cleanup to make sure that our numbers are a little more honest.
Yeah,
That's
I think
true.
PR boxes, PR sandboxes and Tugboat demo sandboxes are not reporting stats.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, that too.
Could that be where the discrepancy is with Civi CRM? Is that maybe they are reporting like demo or
that would be a
sandbox?
question I would have as well, because each one of our websites with Civi, we've probably got 2 or 3 dozen sites with Civi that we support. Each of them has at least 3 other non-production instances that we use internally that are still, they're on the internet, but they're basic auth protected. But I have no idea how those get counted or not as far as the Civi usage statistics, but that would balloon the numbers fairly significantly if they're counted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing, comparing across different systems is likely to be fraught with differences, but Neil's numbers are really interesting in that the numbers that Civi counts across, their different platforms, Civi counting Drupal, counting Backdrop, counting WordPress, those are all likely to be the same. So relative to each other, Backdrop still makes up a relevant percentage of Civi's installs, even if Civi the total number of Civi installs and the total number of Backdrop installs don't quite line up.
Yeah, looking at our stats, same habit as Tim has very regularly. What I've noticed is that we have this cluster of well looked after sites that I see moving to new versions as they come up, and you can see it in the stats. Like it's a table, and there's a section of that table that has a good, well, like maybe 2,000 sites that are slowly but regularly moving to supported versions and those that have security updates. That's my only observation. So yeah.
Okay, well let's keep moving here. I think thank you for bringing that up, Neil. It's very interesting data, even though we don't quite fully know what it means. But yeah, that is very exciting to hear. Just Civi's. I mean, Civi's never been disengaged from Backdrop, but a focus on Backdrop support is very much appreciated and exciting.
You
As
want
a
me
next,
to take any, yeah, I think
sorry.
Greg and I are
Oh.
going to say about the same thing, I think.
Yeah. As a next step, because that's when you bring up a topic, usually that's what you do during a meeting. Is that if we do have an agenda for the next marketing meeting or discussion when that happens, is just to make a note that you should be looped in, invited, or at least looped in.
Let's plan on doing something at Backdrop Live for sure. Get an update from Civi. I'd also love to just get an update like internally where the project's going. Is there any big events on the horizon for Civi or anything like that? Just because I don't follow the Civi development, but I do have a couple of clients that use Civi and considering it for some personal use too.
Yeah, for your benefit, Neil, but if you haven't heard before, Backdrop Live is an event that we schedule regularly. So the next upcoming one is April 4 and 5 this year. So
Yep, I'm familiar with. I remember when that was birthed. So can I? And I often have a conflict, and I often don't know how I can be of use. So you all can help me with that. So one thing that I heard that could be a takeaway and is to go get some more clarity about what is actually being counted and how possibly. You folks, or some of you might understand that better than I would, but I can certainly be the conduit back. And then other than Laren, are any of you are on the Backdrop Civi CRM Mattermost channel? Because we
I
have
signed up at one point, but I have
No.
not checked
Okay.
in for a long time.
Okay, because I mean that would just be one way, Tim and others.
Sure.
You could be in direct conversation with core team, with all the users,
Sure.
should there be a need for that. And that's where I promote live pretty much every time. But
Good.
okay, so I'll take away the question of a source and integrity of data, and I'll come back and
it's not more integrity, and you can refer, because this meeting is being recorded, it's going to be available on the internet, is whether secondary non-production sites are being counted in the stats, and if there's any way to either exclude or differentiate those. That's the
secondary
key.
non-production sites. Okay,
Yes.
I'll write that down before I forget, because
Yes. And then we can make sure that we slot in one of the sessions in Backdrop Live to discuss specifically about CVCRM.
Yeah,
it is interesting.
yeah, there's usually a presence of it. Okay, thank
Can
you
you
all.
also, can you
Thank
also
you.
share the link that you were referring to, that between the Backdrop and the Civi development that you were talking about, that Laren's involved in? And
I shared both links, Izzy, just above. One to the site that we have all known about, and one to a site that's, I think, new to all of us that requires a Civi membership. And I'm about to send Jen the graphic that I couldn't quite put into the chat here because it didn't give me permission to do so.
yeah.
Sorry, easy meant the
Mattermost.
Yeah.
Oh, I beg
Mattermost.
your pardon. Okay, sorry, Izzy, completely misunderstood. I will do that in a minute,
thank you.
and then I shall leave.
Well, thank
Nice
you.
to see you.
All right, our next little topic here was something that was just raised in Zulip is jQuery 4 has been making some waves this week because they released a new beta just day before yesterday of jQuery 4.0. Kind of an exciting milestone for jQuery. The big headline thing for jQuery 4.0, besides enhancements and deprecations, is the removal of Internet Explorer support entirely. Uh, Not a big surprise. It's been 5 years since jQuery had a major update with the release of jQuery 3.0. So the final real death of Internet Explorer is not surprising. We dropped full support for Internet Explorer in Backdrop 127 in this latest release, so the timing there is nice. Despite jQuery 4.0 just having come out, or jQuery 4.0 beta having just come out a couple days ago, the final release date for jQuery 4 is not defined yet. Probably this year. I think that's about the only clear information. And then also the end of life for jQuery 3.0 also is not clear. From what we've seen in online discussions, it's looking like the jQuery team is conducive to uh, 2026 at the earliest as being the end of life of jQuery 3. But quite honestly, it doesn't really matter a whole lot for us, like when the end of life is. With our pattern having been to adopt jQuery 3 but leave 1 in, if jQuery 4 were to come out, we would just add another option for switching to jQuery 4. I think it's interesting that in this discussion, it's actually a catch from the Drupal community that's communicating with jQuery's community, saying, "Oh, well, the release date of jQuery is highly important to Drupal because we're only going to ship with 3 or 4." Um, and for us, we already have this toggle, and I don't think that we're going to be pinned to using one version or the other. I think it's much more likely that when jQuery 4 comes out, the first thing we'll do is add it as another toggle option and then hope that contrib starts moving and becoming more compatible with jQuery 4 and then move towards then making that the default. And then eventually, well, the first thing we would do is remove jQuery 1 support before we remove jQuery 3 support.
Yeah.
So go
We
ahead,
have an
Greg.
issue in our queue to gather telemetry data for jQuery as well. That's not implemented, although we're gathering for everything else. So once that's in, we'll have pretty solid data to support the removal of version 1 once it's below a, like, I don't know, one amount. Like usually it's the 2080 rule if it's below 20%. And by removal, I'm sure that if people need it, we'll probably move it to contrib and people can continue using it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love our telemetry
I love it.
information. It's also been a couple of weeks now since since
Okay.
we had the CK editor data finally starting collecting. I think 2 weeks ago, actually, literally, we added the CK editor to backdropcms.org as a telemetry data point. Let's just take a look at that just for fun. Let's see, share, and here we go. So yeah, this is all of our telemetry data. Looks like one thing there's lots of things we could improve about this page. We could use charts. We could start sorting them by value. We could start excluding things that aren't really relevant, but uh, some data is definitely better than messy data. So we've got sites that are running neither CKEditor 4 or 5 is 2%. Both 4 and 5 is about 8%. Just 4 is 40%, and just 5 is 50%. So, but keep in mind this is only Backdrop 127 sites and newer. So the number of CKEditor 4 sites, you can pretty much assume anything that's running Backdrop 126 or earlier is CKEditor 4. But this is really great as far as sites that have upgraded to or Backdrop 127, which has been out for 3 weeks now. In that span, more than half of the sites that have upgraded have immediately switched over to exclusively CKEditor 5, and another, roughly 10% have enabled CKEditor 5 and might be using it in addition to CKEditor 4. So this is great. It's looking so far from what I've seen and heard in Zulip and in the issue queue, the transition has been pretty smooth, which has been fantastic. Does anybody have any anecdotal upgrade stories now that CKEditor 5 has been in Backdrop for 3 weeks?
I have something that I noticed in Drupal, in the Drupal implementation of CKEditor 5, which was new to me, and it came as a support, a series of support questions actually in my day job. And it seems I haven't delved into it yet. I need to dig deeper. It seems that the implementation of CKEditor 5 in Drupal land is that everything is handled is restricted to being handled by plugins. And you know how there's the section where you can specify the tags that you would allow? That is actually read only now. So you
Mhm.
cannot add something if it's supported by a plugin. You need to use that plugin. And it came as a surprise to me. And this is something like a sort of like a comparison of implementations. So yeah, something to note.
Yeah, I know Jen has expressed frustration at that quite a bit. And even though it's locked in the user interface, it's still separate in config, and that can make it so that you can end up with mismatches between what CKEditor and the filtered HTML is allowing, which is just kind of it gets messy. Backdrop still only uses the one filter tag list from the filtered HTML uh, filter, and it just CKEditor obeys what the filter system has specified, which eliminates that chance of like two separate sets of rules, which is nice.
The other thing that I wanted to note is that we had a lot of support questions about that was one of the problems, but there's also some upstream. There were some early upstream problems
Mm-hmm.
where CKEditor as a library seemed to strip out certain tags. I think that it had a particular issue with lists,
Mm-hmm.
list items, but I think that that was resolved. Um, what we usually do is we have an issue in the queue to keep an eye on the versions of the library and regularly try to keep that up to date, even before security releases. Just make sure that we have the. Again, that's a different. I know that security in Drupal ships with core, but generally in Backdrop land, everything that is an external library, even in contrib space, we make sure that we bundle it with the actual module or project that needs it. There's less concern for site owners and developers to worry about these things. The only exception to that is if a specific library is being used by multiple projects, we just create a module that is um, a requirement, and it only includes the library. So yeah.
Yep. All right. Yeah, so yeah, 127 is looking good. Speaking of 127, we are looking at making the 127.1 release. I think I'd actually hoped to make it this week, but it's kind of been getting away from me. Next week is really busy too for me personally, but I think that as soon as we can, that 127.1 release, we'll be trying to get out. It does have just a half dozen or so bug fixes at this point, but one of them is something to help smooth the upgrade process. Even though it doesn't cause any harm, it does show a kind of scary looking warning um, or an error that there's an undefined variable, and we'd like that not to happen as people are upgrading from 126. So the 127 release still we'd like, or 127.1 we'd like to get out as soon as possible. We're going to shoot for next week again, but yeah, hopefully that should be possible. Maybe we could do it over the
Yeah,
weekend. That might be another time
I
with more
see
availability.
five issues closed already in the 127.1 milestone and 10 open.
Yeah. And there's a number of RTBC issues too that we could probably get completed. So in the near future, 127.1, we're going to try to get that out.
Yep.
Um, and related to versions, Backdrop 2.0. Want to raise just the scheduled meeting that we're going to be holding on February 29th at the end of this month. On Leap Day, we're going to be talking about the big leap to 2.0, as Tim was saying, accompanied by a fun goat gif. So there's some noise moving out about that, but in truth, that meeting's really just going to be. We're not planning on doing any kind of a major announcement around Backdoor 2.0 or its date. It's just going to be discussion and kind of clarification around our 2.0 plans. And that'll just be held at the same time as this normal weekly meeting. I've got an item on the agenda, maybe related to Backdrop 2.0, called versioning change, question mark. Greg, I think this is
Oh,
your topic.
yeah. Well, maybe just a headline. We don't have a lot of time, and better left for that meeting at the end of the month. It's just that all these years, like it's been a decade now that roughly that we are out, and one of the misconceptions and the marketing, if you want to call it that, um, uh, hindrance, I would call it, is that people say, what? Backdrop has been around for like 10 years and still version 1. So no features, it's like there's no progress or whatever, because the major version is still 1. And what we discussed, I vaguely recollect that many years ago, was that maybe we should switch to incrementing the major version more frequently, without touching the API, without necessarily making API breaking changes. So one of the things that I would like to discuss further in that meeting was maybe see if we can switch to a scheme where the major version might be the current year, and then because we have on time 3 releases also scheduled, maybe the minor releases can be 1, 2, or 3, or 1, 5, and 9 to designate the months January, May, and September where we do the releases, and then for the bug fix releases, just regular increments that we do now. The only thing that I would like to consider, because I haven't spent time doing that, is what that would mean as overhead with regards to the branches that we maintain, and that's the only thing that I'm sure that it's gonna be in Nate's and every core committer's mind. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's maybe, do you want to talk about that in the 2.0 meeting, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Well,
Okay.
if anyone wants to just same thing as I've done, a headline of yes, no, and this is what I'm concerned about, and then we can leave the actual discussion for them. Yeah, but don't have to.
That sounds fine to me. The main question I have would be how to signal to folks when there is a breaking change, since that's the
Yes,
sort of, but that's
yes.
it. I mean, and I think
I
that's,
haven't.
you can work around that, but yeah.
Yeah, I haven't figured it out. So what we have been doing so far is that we have been accommodating with the versioning the developer aspect of it, like the API breaking aspect of it, and we haven't been accommodating the marketing, if you want, like the outreach of Backdrop and how that might be hindered by the misconception that it's not moving as fast as other products there. So yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and all right, sorry. The only thing I'll bring up is, like Android has their whole marketing thing where they have, even though there's versions underlying it, they have like a tag name that goes along with the versions to sort of
Mhm.
decouple the branding of the release from the technical underpinnings of the version that's doing it. So just throwing that out there is one possibility too.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, the way that Backdrop has approached backwards compatibility, in truth, we have had some breaks in the 1.x cycle, just like Drupal 7 has had some breaks in compatibility in the 1.x cycle. But they're usually fairly gentle breaks, and also well past the point of being relevant, like our dropping of support for Internet Explorer, for example. Like, or in 127, we also removed vendor prefixes for like WebKit and Mozilla, and it was like, that was like, it wasn't even a relevant concern anymore by the time that we finally dropped those areas of support. And so that's kind of been our policy during 1.x anyway. And I think that if we did switch to this kind of longer cycle, it would be very similar, where it's like by the time we're actually dropping support for stuff, it's not even an issue anymore. Like dropping support for old versions of PHP, we drop support for versions, I don't know, some maybe even version of 4 all the way up to 5.5 all in one fell swoop. But it was like, I mean, we still support PHP 5.6, which at this point is not relevant, right? But that's sort of the thing, is that it's like, we wait so long before that support gets dropped that it just really isn't an issue anymore.
Yeah, I think that the minimum, I'm looking at the thing, not I think, I see that the minimal that we were supporting before that was 5.3.29. So it was after that. So not version 4, but yeah. Yeah.
That's right. I think we would have had more date problems because PHP 5.3 was finally when dates finally got their act together. Tim, do you want to say you're a little bit there before?
I can quickly. I'm not against I think the problem, I'm not convinced that the marketing problem is huge, but the idea of having more frequent versioning makes sense to me. I'm just not sure that there's a number of problems. Like if we need to be locked into using the year to do that, there's other ways to do that. So I just think, let's throw out a few ideas, and then see which one we like best. And we have to address the API breaking stuff. There's a few other, and how it's going to work in GitHub, right? So there are a few other issues that have to be solved, and I feel a little bit like having a new major release every year could go the opposite way, to where it doesn't mean anything anymore. So but
where it doesn't mean anything at all.
Totally. Because it's too frequent, right? So yes, it's not frequent enough now, but do we go from every 10 years to every year, or is there something in between there? We try to schedule like major releases every 2 or 3 years or something. Anyways, I'd like to put that off till our 2.0 meeting.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So things like that would be topics to bring up during that meeting, and what major features you would like to see when we sort of like that, or things that we haven't been working and postponing because they're going to require breaking changes. These are things that can be brought up during that meeting. Maybe compile a list
beforehand.
Yes.
I'll just say that, like, from a marketing standpoint, if somebody threw out like there should be a new theme in version 2.0, and somebody else said, well, we don't need 2.0 to do that, then I would say, yeah, both things are true, but sometimes having like a major release it's just a target for, we could put a new theme into the earlier version, but we're probably not going to. If we set that as a goal, then so we shouldn't think about the 2.0 release purely and technical. And I think that's what you're already suggesting, Greg, because there's also a marketing and even just a goal setting value to it, right?
Well, it's an outreach. It's the same thing that would happen, like in Australian government recently. They started, because they've adopted Drupal and open source in general, now that it's considered a public good. They started looking at how much, like when they engage a developer or an agency to complete a government job, they started looking at how much contribution is being done towards that project, from the perspective of the more engaged your developers and your team are with the project, the more knowledge they have, but also they understand the greater good of contributing to open source, and they want that to happen through the people that they engage for the projects. So it's just that kind of marketing thing, I would say. Right.
I gotta go.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Tim. Let's see. We've only got couple minutes left. We had one last topic, and that's regards to the field UI design. There's a big meta issue at 779, long old school issue. But Greg, there was some new developments this week in the world of Drupal that you were thinking maybe we could leverage, I think.
Yeah, so I brought that up because there's no activity in that issue, and usually what we do is we bring up issues during this meeting that had activity and they're waiting for feedback. and maybe we have like maybe 2 minutes to just even headlines, just bring up some issue numbers. But that is basically, that is the meta issue. If you click on the link that is the last on the list of items there, and then so this is the early version of the problem, basically. So less technical people, when they're trying to add a field, they don't understand what they're going to add, or they would like to have a visual representation of what they're adding. And this is what this module in Drupal and Dream fields used to do. If you scroll to the very bottom of it, yeah, we had some iterations there, some things, but yeah, this is what has landed in Drupal 10, basically.
Yep,
10.2.
which is a very simple concept where it's like we tried to, like this concept, the early concept was like, hey, let's actually like render the widget, you know, like actually have it show what it
Well, it's not
really
the
is.
actual widget, it's examples of the widget.
Yes, yeah. And this approach, honestly, like the Drupal approach, is a nice realistic implementation where it's like, let's just use image representations for these concepts.
Also, like when people are building content types, they aren't thinking about the widgets. They're thinking about, what do I want on my page of content? And so showing them a widget is asking the wrong question. Like, you want to ask them, like, do you want a paragraph or do you want a number? You don't want to ask them, do you want a big box or do you want a little box? That's like a secondary question. So when you're like, okay, I want a paragraph, and they're like, okay, we can assume that's a big box.
Well,
But
these
like
are
this
the
is
data types, though,
good.
aren't they?
What?
They are the data types. Like it's not asking.
No, like in this instance, they've got them all mixed up, right? Like if I want a number field that's a select list, do I choose number or do I choose select list? Because number is data type and a select list is a behavior for how you enter the data. And the
Oh,
same
yeah,
thing
you're
with
right. That
like
is a little
file
bit mixed
upload is
up.
a behavior on how you enter the data, but like link is like the type of, it's describing the type of data that's stored in the database, not how you enter it. So it's just like they've got it all mixed up here where they haven't decided whether they're describing one or the other, which is kind of what I would expect for Drupal. That's how the field system is already. But yeah, it's if you're building a web form, then it makes sense to ask what box do you want on the form. But if you're building a content type, you need to ask like, what kind of content do you want stored in the
Yeah,
database?
yeah. I don't know. That I'm sure that there was a huge discussion about this in Drupal, but it's interesting. It's like if I were adding a single value select list from the form aspect, and if I wasn't in that mindset of like what type of data am I going to
Story.
display, then I would have a really hard time figuring out that I'm supposed to click plain text to add a select list, you know? Like that would be a major brain buster for me. I would just struggle with that every time.
Yeah, but I mean, as it is now, there's no way to add a checkbox, right? You'd have to know it was Boolean because they haven't decided, whether they're asking you about the form or the data. It's all mixed together. And so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think like doing it this way would give us the opportunity to be like, this is the type of text, and then you use that description and be like, here are the supported widgets for it, or whatever we want to call them, where it's like you can put plain text in via select list, you can put Boolean via a checkbox, and that way. Or you do it the other way around, right? Where you could be like, if you're going to have a checkbox, that could either be a Boolean value, an integer value, it gives you the option to describe it both ways so that the person using the form always knows what the right answer is. Whereas if you do one or the other, there's always going to be someone who doesn't know what the right answer is.
And I think a lot of people who fill this stuff out don't understand like the data types and the implications of that. And so like I like that two-staged approach where the first thing people care about is what is the widget? Like I need a select field, I need a checklist
Well, on a
field.
web form, that's true. That's
Yeah.
not true for building a content type.
I think
Well,
that you're overgeneralizing there, Jen, because
Yes.
I think form elements first.
I mean, I guess
Me,
it depends
so
on if you're starting from a design or if you're just making it up as you go. But like if you're handed a design file, like it's pretty clear from that giant block of text that this is a text field, right?
Yeah, but the thing is like, what's the difference between a plain text field and a number field from the endpoint of like visually,
Yeah.
right? If I've got a number I'm not sure a lot of people would be able to know when it's appropriate to use the number field versus the plain text field. And I agree that this is a long-standing confusion in Drupal for
Right.
how you select the
I
field
think there are
types.
a lot of people who are going to get it wrong too, right? You see that
Yeah,
a lot of time in Drupal sites where they chose the wrong data type and they're just like theming it to make it look the way they want. And I don't think that there's
right.
any way to avoid that. But I
No,
think
but I
asking
do like the idea
somebody
of, yeah, sorry, go
what
ahead.
kind of form you want when what they're looking at is a finished design that shows nothing about a form is it's just a strange, it's going to be really hard for people. If you have someone where, they've already gone through and they're giving you a spreadsheet where there's no finished design and it's like, it's this field type, it's this, then that person is going to be looking for something completely different than what the person who's looking at the finished design is going to be looking for. And so I like this approach that Drupal did because they're not showing either option. And I think that that gives us that, if we were to go this way too, it would give us the opportunity to explain both in this interface, like rather than showing a widget, which doesn't give anyone any choice about what type of data it is, or only asking them for, like we were talking about, the rendered output, like do we put a paragraph in here? That doesn't give them any idea of how the data is going in. This
Yeah.
gives us the opportunity to show both ways. So we could sort
Yeah.
of meet the needs of both those
So
audiences.
are you saying, Jen, and maybe I don't know how Drupal works here, but like select list surfacing this as a top level thing, I think is useful, but it's not actually precluded from plain text and number also having select list options. Like if this was you select number and it's like, okay, well now what kind of widget do you want? Select list could still be one of the widget options there.
Yeah.
But it would definitely it's definitely messy because now what you've done here is that sometimes the first question is the data type, and sometimes the first question is kind of the widget type.
If we could build it though in a way where if they chose the widget, we asked the data question, and if they chose the data, we asked the widget question,
Yep,
then we could still have both people get to the right answer.
yep,
And I think this interface being so different from the other one where it was very rigid of what you were asking on each step, this one I think would give us the flexibility where whether it's step one or step two doesn't really matter because we just need both sets of data.
Yeah.
yep.
Uh, I'm glad that we're recording this because we had multiple discussions about this in the past. But Jen, you've nailed it. Like you've described it really well at the beginning. And the problems or the arguments, excuse me, or disagreements is because of the concept of thinking. Because three people in this discussion mentioned that, oh, I think that from a form perspective first. So that's where the disagreement comes from the
Yeah.
mindset, how people approach it, right? And I'm
And
not
that's
saying
what
one
all
way or
Drupal
the other
people
is
do
right.
too, because we're all
Yeah, yeah,
trained that way,
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Cool. I'm glad that we recorded this. We can refer to that. Right.
Well,
Cool.
so yeah, speaking of recording this, I think that we're out of time for today.
Yes.
We're actually several minutes over. But yeah, thanks everybody for being here today, especially to you, Anthony, for joining us for the first time. It's great to have a new face in these meetings. And yeah, we'll continue to communicate. Of course, we've got the GitHub issue. Zulip is our primary chat platform, and we'll be connecting again next week. And we'll start planning ahead for the February 29th 2.x meeting. So
Great.
thanks everybody for being here today. Any last words or anything?
Thank you, Greg.
Okay. All right. Well,
Thank
thank
you,
you,
Anthony, for
everybody.
joining.
Yep.
Good
Thanks,
to see you.
everybody.
See you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.